Hi, this is Michael Waits, and welcome back to India Game Changer. I love it when the guest is looking at me and smiling. I feel like I need to say something or do something funny, but I'm not really sure what that is today. Anyway, today we are joined by Ajay Jain, a co-founder and managing partner at Silver Needle Ventures. It is great to have you here. How are you doing today?
Hey, Michael, thanks for having me here. I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much for doing it. Before we get into the main part of the conversation, can I get just a little bit of your background for some context?
Sure, Michael. I come from a large family, and the family business was money lending, pawnbroking. So, at a young age of about 5 or 6, I was part of the business. We used to, give money for the articles, gold articles that we kept.
Right.
I think that was the biggest school I ever had. And right from years 5 to 21, I was involved in the born and brought up in Hyderabad, and I did my engineering in the electrical space.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, did my master's at University of Arizona, Tucson, and that's where I went into the semiconductor industry.
Okay.
Worked with the likes of Intel and AMD, working on the next set of processors, multiprocessors. So, core technical person, but the calling has been always to do something on the business side. So, did my MBA. This was in 2011 at Indian School of Business. I graduated in marketing and strategy and went into the education space. Wanted to do something, I guess, good for the society, and education and clean tech were the two areas that I was looking at. Had my own startup in the education space. This was more in the affordable private school space. So we raised monies from Michael Susan Dell Foundation and Grey Matters.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so was part of that for 4 years. Moved on to lead the innovation and incubation at T-Hub. T-Hub today is the world's largest innovation ecosystem. It's in Hyderabad,
Okay.
and we were the founding team. So did my stint there for 2 years. Since then, I've been investing into early stage tech companies. So did 25 early stage tech investments in those 4 years. That has been giving us handsome returns, and now have launched Silver Needle Ventures. So that's kind of the journey.
I got it. I want to get back to that in a second, but first I want to ask you, what was it like going from India as a youngster? Because even if you're going to go get a master's degree, you're still not like, you're not 40, right? You're in your 20s probably. What was it like going from India to Arizona of all places?
Oh, actually, it was not bad. I first actually landed up in Michigan.
Oh my God.
That's yes.
Freezing cold.
That
Go
was
ahead.
where, yeah, that was my first admit, but couldn't get the scholarship. So that's when moved to Arizona.
Got it.
And I think Arizona was lovely, at least with the weather perspective. It wasn't bad comparable to Hyderabad.
Yeah.
I think the biggest learning and the biggest takeaway for me was the methodical approach of things in the US.
Fair enough.
I learned to break down things much better. And that's when I think the education quality improved a lot more both ways.
Do you feel like having that kind of international experience, no matter where it is, right? The US is a good place for this, obviously, right? But let's say there was a more methodical approach. It could have been a different approach, but was the idea of just being exposed to something so different in such an intense environment, when you come home, does it change the way you look at not just your home, but the rest of the world as well?
I totally agree to that. I think diversity is a very important part of a personality,
Yeah.
right? And I learned that. I was also a teaching assistant,
Ah, okay.
even to some PhD students, and that was a learning in itself,
Yeah.
right? Dealing with various people from different walks of life, and how do you justify to each of them, the assignment marks, etc.
Right. But here's the other thing too. It's almost like diversity doesn't exist until you're exposed to it, right? And like, do you learn? I always wonder about this about myself. Like, am I learning more about me when I'm exposed to you? And you can be anybody, right? Not just you. Or am I learning more about you? And I think it's more learning about me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's a deeper point, and I agree. It's always learning about yourself when you're being exposed to various new avenues.
Yeah.
In fact, just yesterday, I was having a chat with a good friend on how might be today's children, at least in the Indian circumstances, are not so exposed to newer avenues. They have a very comfortable life.
Right.
And I guess that's something that needs to change a bit.
But what do you mean they're exposed to a more comfortable life? It's interesting, right? Because I was talking to a guy about this earlier today. India is this super dynamic, kind of very fast growing, well educated place where the economy is growing nicely, the GDP per capita is growing really well. But just like every country, right? There are tier one places, but then there's tier two and tier three. But India also benefits from the fact that the mobile penetration is like 200% or 100 and something percent, right? So it changes the way people interact with data and information. But like, how does that impact all of this stuff that you were just talking about?
Oh, yeah. So I think you're right. And I might be talking about the tier one and tier two, right? Versus, let's say, I will leave out the tier three right now
Fair enough.
from the discussion. So I think the access to a lot of things for the children has made it extremely good for them. And I think they're more open to a lot of adventure, open to learning in different ways
Yeah.
than I was, right? But when I talk about the comfort levels, I think they need to be more exposed to newer ways of doing things.
Interesting.
Might be adventures that are not as well driven. You find something on your own,
Yeah.
right? And that's how I think entrepreneurship is about. And might be we need that as part of the education itself.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. There's a part of me, and you know this, right, from building your own education company, a private education company, but I feel like we're kind of at a tipping point where education itself at scale needs to change. When I look at the way that I was educated and then look at the way my daughter was educated, it wasn't that different, to be fair. And the whole system that I went through was basically based on how do we educate kids in an agrarian economy, right?
Yes.
Not how do we educate kids in a modern economy. And like, I just hope that it's changed. I'm 50 something years old, right? So I don't interact with the schools on a regular basis. You're probably closer to that than I am, but I see what you're saying. Yeah. The way we educate people has to change. Yeah.
Yeah. There are delta changes happening,
Go ahead.
but not large. And I think the education industry by itself has a huge inertia. It changes slowly.
Yeah, but of course, because it's such a big infrastructure. I want to ask you this too. When you went away to school, was there an expectation from your family that you would just come back and join the family business, or did they kind of realize like this kid wants to build something on his own? And that's good, right? Because he's comes from an entrepreneurial family. We're just going to let him do his entrepreneurial thing. Like, what is that struggle like?
Sure. That's an interesting question. My dad was always clear. He has gone through hardship. So all my siblings, 12 of us, would have to get higher education and go their own path.
Awesome.
So no one comes back into the family business, but I was one of those who was very keen to run it actually, but that didn't happen.
Okay. But why do you think, but don't you think it's kind of cool that like, you can watch the struggles of your elders, right? Your grandparents, your parents, and there's a part of them, it's really good because it can be kind of binary, right? Half the people will just be like, I don't want my kids to struggle like I did. I want them to live a life of ease and I'm just going to bring them into the business and teach them how to do this. And then the next generation will just take care of this. And then the other side is kind of like, you know what? You're on your own. I gave you everything I possibly could. I educated you and I struggled. You will also struggle. Like, I'll make sure you're not going to die, but you got to make your own way. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. And I think I like both sides of it for some reasons.
Yep.
But I think it also comes back from where you are coming. So humble beginnings might be you want your kid to really grow from there.
Yeah.
Whereas once you have a much stabler life, might be you can, say, okay, go find out what you really want.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
So what got you interested in the investing world? Because it's really far away from like the family business and kind of far away nominally from engineering. I can make the case later that it's actually very similar, but I'm curious what got you interested in the investment business.
So actually it is close to the family business because we were always valuing things against which we lend money, right? So if it is worth $100, we give $70.
Yep.
Right. So that way it was always closer. And I think the main thing that got me interested in the investment space was growing with that second generation clan of entrepreneurs, my friends, etc., who were clear that business is the way to grow things, right? And I think you had two choices, whether you wanted to become a businessman yourself or you wanted to invest into businesses. And I chose the second.
Is there a reason why you went early stage as opposed to growth? I mean, I can make the case with you that like growth stage investing, and I speak about everything in relative terms, right? So please don't take us the wrong way. But like early stage investing is the hardest stage. And you can say, well, angel, but whatever it is. But that stage before there's growth is the hardest. So it's the most risk and the highest return potentially. But is there a reason why you went there as opposed to we're just going to go growth stage because it's obvious who's going to, more obvious, yeah, who's going to win?
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting question. So we started Exceed Partners at an early stage. So we used to go even when you have an MVP, right? You do not have revenues.
Yep.
We used to invest in them, right? With Silver Needle, since I'm taking more public money, I'm moving a little ahead of the curve and saying you have an MVP plus revenues, you have some product going on, and
Yep.
that's when we come in. So I'm avoiding, let's say, the value of debt to some extent.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But the reason why we are in that stage is because we are clearly a mentor-driven fund. We want to be a partner to the startup and we would help them grow, right? So we would actually, so the interesting part is we would actually earmark funds for the startup for the follow-on 2 rounds, right? So we would go in when they're growing as well, but we want to be part of the journey.
Yeah, I understand the follow-on part. I want to ask you about the mentoring side of it, right? Because this is where things really get tricky, right? When I look at big investment firms like Andreessen Horowitz and then contrast them against firms like Benchmark, right? And they're obviously operating in different parts of the value investment chain than you are. But Andreessen Horowitz has made this decision that we're just going to build this entire infrastructure and then we're going to invest in companies and feed them into our infrastructure. And Benchmark has basically said, we're going to invest in growth and you're on your own. Like, we'll make connections for you. We're not going to do the hard yards. And it feels to me like you're doing this at the early stage and just going, we're going to invest in you, but we're also going to sit next to you, right? Yeah. Metaphorically, and just say, here's what we've learned over time investing in the first 25 companies, and here's what we think we can add value. I'm really curious about how that works in reality.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. See, I think we are clear that we want to play to the strengths of the team, right? There's a diverse team, but all of them have some skirmishes with the startup world. For example, entrepreneurs, ecosystem players, plus investors, right? So we are playing to, and the technology background we all have, right? I come from a semiconductor plus education, right? So we want to play to the strength. So how do we do that, and how do we justify to the startup, right? One is we are saying we would take a board observer seat or a board seat in all our portfolio companies, right? But more importantly, what we're saying is we would work with them on a week-on-week basis, understand. I think, see, it's the journey which is very critical, right, for a startup founder. And there's a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah.
The question is, they want to talk to someone who can help them position themselves the right way. I am a mirror. I'm not really saying this is the way it is to be done unless I'm sitting in a board seat, right? I'm asking you to reflect more clearly, and I'm the person you have to talk to, suggest, look, I have a HR issue versus, how do I get my cap table correct? Right. So we are there to help you there, and obviously the connects. The other point of it is we have a very strong investor base. The CEO of one of the most popular radio channels in India is a investor in the fund, right? The CEO of large US-based billion-dollar finance companies, India's site head, is a sponsor actually. Right. So we have the right investor beta, and that's a tactical move from our side to help these guys get the right attention. Right. And we are telling them clearly, look, you spend about 4 to 6 hours a month to help these portfolio. We'll map you. So I think the experience I have from T-Hub, right, where we map the mentors. So T-Hub is like any given day, 500 startups versus 60, 80 mentors, right? So the experience of mapping these mentors, getting them to get the right value, the startups to get the right value, right matchmaking, is something that will help us in good stead for the entire mentorship program.
So this is what's really interesting to me is that to be a great founder, right? And I say this a lot, but I'm just going to say it again. To be a great founder, you really have to care about the thing you're building, right? You can't just notice a market
Sure,
gap and think like, okay, I can do that. You really have to believe in it and care about it, right? But it takes a special kind of
sure.
person to do it. And that person's usually headstrong. Like, how do you figure out institutionally if somebody is going to be mentorable? Do you know what I mean? Like, because even if they can build a big company, if you can't add value, then what's the point in a way? But like
Sure.
the greatest sports players can also be coached. How do you figure that part out? Do you know what I mean? Like, even if they have all the skills,
Sure.
if they can't be coached, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so let me give you a bit about the secret sauce of Silver Needle without really revealing it.
Good.
We
Without
have
revealing
three
it. Sorry, go ahead.
we have three characteristics that we would like in any founder,
Go
and
ahead.
I'm not enlisting them here, but I'm saying the team, the general partners and the investment committee rates each of the founders against these characteristics individually, and then we collectively decide whether we are all in sync or not, right?
And you're not going
So
to tell me what
so
those three I promise I won't tell anybody.
I won't fall for that
I'm
one.
kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I just wanted to make you laugh. I didn't think you'd fall
Yeah.
for it. I just wanted to make you laugh. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I think you're very right. We are clear. For me, it is the story of the founder, right?
Yeah, it has to be.
Unless I see the story right, I am not investing, right? So I need to see the story behind it. If a founder tells me, look, I'm here in it for making the money, mostly is out.
Yeah, it is though, right?
Most,
Isn't that
yeah.
part of the reverse mythology around startups, right? The idea I think that the people outside of the industry get is I just want to find a guy and a gal that just wants to make a ton of money. But the reality is that that doesn't work. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
Like my grandfather once said to me, if you hang out with people just to like make the money, you'll spend the rest of your life earning it, which meant it's just the
Right.
wrong way to live, yeah?
And I think, as I had said, the journey is important, right? So if you're enjoying the journey,
Yeah,
the money would be there.
sure.
There is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow,
I think so too.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I think we believe that we want to be part of the journey along with the startup founder. And it is the story that should kind of come out as genuine. That's the single most important thing for me when I am going in to invest into a startup.
Do you feel like you're also constantly learning that like one of the greatest things about being an early stage investor is you get to talk to people that are building things that are different and differentiated and that you can wake up every day going, I'm going to learn something really cool from that lady who's building that thing,
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the thing that keeps me going, right?
right?
That's the thing that keeps me. I give office hours to some of the incubators, accelerators across the country because I still like that thing to speak with founders without any strings attached,
Yeah,
without saying I'm an investor, right?
right.
Just what you're talking about, what you want from me who's been there, done that, but don't talk to me just as an investor.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, think about what I get to learn by just talking to people all the time, right? So there's no preconceived
Um,
notions of me giving them any money or doing that kind of thing, but I get to actually have conversations with people. And for me, the learning is the best part of it by far.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It's an amazing experience. There was a time when I was at D Hub that I would speak to almost 6 to 8 startups every day,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was exhilarating, but now I've cooled down. But I still continue to speak to a lot of startups, get their ideas.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can be too honest about the feedback,
Okay.
yeah, especially for the very early ones.
Do you feel like it gets easier and easier for you to figure out, like during a first meeting or during a second meeting, particularly after speaking, spending a few years speaking to six entrepreneurs a day or six people a day about this stuff, and then obviously making investments, where you meet somebody and you're like, this is a great idea, but I just don't think you can do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do have the gut feeling more often than not,
Yeah.
but I still try to rationalize it
Sure, sure,
as
sure.
much as I can.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's there. And, I sometimes end up meetings in 15 minutes because of that very
Right.
reason.
Right. I mean, I feel bad too, but I can tell. Look, there's sometimes that people want to be on the show and I get them onto a prep call and I just think there's just not enough there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's
I
just
know. Yeah.
experience speaking. What is the overall thesis of an early stage fund in India? And I'm curious if you think it's different in India than it would be in Indonesia or in some other country?
Yeah, I think let me tell you, I was reading this book, The Power Law by Michael Salaby,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
A very interesting book. And I think most funds, especially in this part of the world, might be looking at a bell curve more than the power curve, right? What I mean by that
Yeah.
is they're looking at how to get average results out of the entire fund,
Yeah.
right? Whereas we are clearly approaching it with saying, look, each investment I make, how do I get the home run, right? And I'm trying to get deeper and deeper into that philosophy. And the follow on rounds really help us. So we have earmarked 35% of the fund for follow on
Yeah.
rounds, right? And that's something not as common when compared to the early stage funds in India, right? Well, globally, what I've seen is might be the misses are more, right, than the hits. And I'm talking at a fund level.
Right. Right.
But I think India being at the stage where it is, being at the, it's very difficult for an entrepreneur to go totally wrong in India, right? You should be doing something terribly bad, right, to
And
go
why is that? Just
totally
because the
wrong.
growth is so fast or there's so much
Because
opportunity?
there's so much market and you're doing it at a low cost.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the average hits are much higher in India when compared to at least the West. Right. And I do not have numbers for Indonesia, for example,
Yeah.
to
Fair
make a
enough.
comparison.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we are at a very nice stage, right? I mean, we are finding newer sectors like just now Skyroot, the startup, launched the vehicle into the space, right? And that's indigenous startup launching something into the aerospace is a great achievement,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We are not confined to the software world anymore. We are looking at using technology across various segments. That's, I think, the most interesting part where we are at this stage in India.
And is there some kind of synergistic view across the portfolio? In other words, do you look at it from a portfolio basis or do you look at it on an individual basis? Do you know what I mean? Are you trying to have a balanced thing? Because, you're not investing in 7,000 companies, you're investing in 20 or 30 companies, right? And it depends how you take a portfolio view of them, or you just don't care. You're just trying to invest in the best stuff. Do you know what I mean?
As I had said earlier, we are playing to our strengths. So we would still look at anything to do with technology,
Yep.
but we have some areas of focus. For example, B2B SaaS is a favorite among ours.
Yeah.
D2C consumer internet is another space we would like to be in. Sustainability is again an interesting space where we would like to see technology being used much more, and
Right.
we are betting much heavier. Deeper technologies has always been a favorite of ours, and we would go invest into it more. And the emerging ones like a Web 3.0. So those are the areas we would like to focus on. We would avoid those that have a larger gestation period or a high burn kind of situation.
Yeah, fair enough. What's your view on
Yeah.
Web3? Like, what do you look for when you think about what the Web3 investment ecosystem is going to look like and how it's going to grow and what its impact is going to be?
Yeah. So I think I would look at Web3. A single parameter that I would look at is efficiency, right? I think, technology needs to enhance efficiency.
Yep.
And if that's not happening clearly for me, it's a no, right? And that's why some of the extensions of Web3 I'm not keen on.
Like what?
And and some of my partners might have a differing view, and that's why
That's
we are a
fine.
diverse
Yep.
set of people.
Yep.
But for me, the single key point that I would like to make is the efficiency at the end of the day, right? And the scale that it is growing at.
Okay. What
Yeah.
is an example of that? So for me, Web3 looks like this. How can I build a community around the thing that I'm building? How can I engage that community in the thing that I'm building to make sure that they support it, but that they also benefit from it? How can I make sure that this decentralized aspect of the Web3 also has a hybrid element to it where there has to be physical interaction at some level because that's where humans make real connections. And yet it allows me to do things in a virtual world that I can't do in the physical world that benefits my existence in the physical world. Does that all make
Ah,
sense?
yeah, that does. The single word that I would pick out from that is the decentralization,
Go
right?
ahead. Yeah,
Now that I think can create inefficiencies if not done properly.
of course.
Let's say securities, for example, right?
Yep.
And cross-border transactions, right? You need the decentralization, and that's acceptable. because there can be an inefficiency in the system at that level.
Yep.
But at a very P2P level or a C2C level, you are having decentralization and causing inefficiencies. I do not believe that's a good way.
It's a super great point to make, though, right? In other words, there's a reason why, and let's just use like the New York Stock Exchange as an example, as a proxy. I don't really care about the trading part of it, but the centralization of that and the idea that somebody sits in the middle and guarantees both sides without either one of us knowing who we are, right? Like I could trade 1,000,000 shares of Apple with you and never know it was you, or I could trade 1,000,000 shares of Apple with literally like 10,000 people and never know who it was. And that centralization actually makes it super efficient. I know where to go. I know who's in charge, and I know how to like mitigate discrepancies, right? This is super efficient. Now, there are other places in the world where I'd like to have decentralization. This is why I mentioned the word hybrid before. And that's why I think that that's where the real power is. If the decentralized part of it is what gives it its efficiency and makes it faster, right? Then I'm all in.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree with you. And for example, let's say a vaccine, right?
Yeah.
A vaccine tracked and being ensured that, temperature, etc., is being maintained, etc., the cold chain value. I think I am all for it, right? But somewhere where it's not necessary and you're just adding layers, it creates inefficiencies, and that's where it'll not work.
Yeah, I agree with you. Look, I think it's super exciting, right? Because we're at the super, super early stages of it. I look at ways where I can take advantage of any kind of new technology in every business that I build, because I've seen it happen. When I was at Goldman Sachs, the idea that we'd use like a non-Windows backend was anathema. But as soon as Linux became supported by Red Hat, and it was actually a product we could buy and had a service agreement around it, happy to use free software and open source software, right? So it's a complete different thing, and it made us way more efficient. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I agree. I think that is where we also would like to see some of the startups that we would invest in end up with.
Yeah.
And that's something that we keep our ears and eyes open for.
Do you pay attention to the open source software development? I did a recording yesterday with a guy from Finland whose whole company is built around open source software. And it was just an incredible discussion about how to benefit from that while still building a really gigantic business.
Yeah, and I think that's extremely powerful. In fact, I was speaking to a robotics company the other day, which is trying to do tactile, hand movements, etc., for dexterity. And I was trying to understand and actually advise them to choose one path, whether you want to be like an IP provider, right? You want to be like a 3M, for example.
Right.
Or do you want to actually go to the end consumer? And if you want to do that, that's a very different path versus whether you want to get your IP, royalty, etc. going, right? And which one you have to choose, you have to decide, because I think both are very different paths, both require different kind of monies and different kind of people.
Yeah, I agree. Look, the VC business globally, and I think this is true in every country, right? In a way, kind of tends to be a syndicate business, right? And part of that is risk mitigation and risk sharing. You're smiling at me. Is that not true, or?
I agree, but please complete your question.
So, but I'm just curious, right? Because the syndication of any deal means you have to work with other partners, right? And in some cases, because the way one operates could be super different from the way another fund operates, that the syndication becomes a little bit challenging because of the differences between the funds. I'm curious if you think that Silver Needle operates in a way that's different. Like, then what are some of the challenges for dealing with other partners if you're going to do this syndication thing?
Sure. So we are early in the stages. So we have invested in one startup and are looking at 4 others, and except for one, most of them are syndication.
Yep.
But it's not like a formal syndication. It just so happens that people are coming on the cap table.
Okay.
For us, it's very clear that among the portfolio, 50% or so of the startups will go in as a lone investor, as an individual, and try to, guide the startup through the journey. Right. That's something that we have decided because we think we need a better skin in the game, trying to get the startup go through the rigmarole. The other part of it is, I think other investors also look at value. For example, one of the startups, we changed some of the term sheet detailing because of where we come from, the learnings, etc.
Right.
The reserve matters, etc. We changed, and I think the other investors actually appreciated what we brought to the table.
Interesting.
So we are happy to work with other investors. The reason I smiled is because I think I agree there is a herd mentality, but we are clear we would go in when we see value and we can give value back to our investors. We are clear with that intent.
Yeah, I didn't even mean to suggest that there was a herd mentality, and I would never suggest that you would participate in that. I mean, look, one of the things, again, that I learned from a big investor at GIC when I was working at Goldman, he said to me, the greatest investors are the people that can anticipate other people's anticipations, right? So you want to get in first before everybody else figures it out. If you're herd mentality investing, well, everybody's doing the same thing, it's going to be
Correct.
harder to win. And you said earlier, like, I don't want to use the word venturing. We're not attempting to get average returns, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't suggest that you're trying to do herd mentality. As you get more and more into the development of Silver Needle, do you change the way that you evaluate companies that actually do get investment? Do you know what I mean? Because you said you have a methodology for determining whether you like the founders and the founding team and stuff like that, those three principles, right? But as you grow and as you learn more, do you adapt those things as well?
Definitely we adapt. I think even technology changes, what
Right.
we're looking for changes, but I think the foundation is very strong. Right? We're building on a foundation that we have done through the earlier 25 investments that have paid handsome dividends for us.
Great.
So foundation is strong. We will stick to those principles, but yes, we will adapt to what is happening in the market today. How do I give the right conditions, terms, etc. in my documentation, and how do I evaluate technologies? I think that's the piece that keeps evaluating evolving much better, right? Much more
Yeah.
with us.
Do you ever
Yeah.
have meetings with your own partners, right? So the other investment partners, the people that are part of Silver Needle, you're sitting around and just thinking, you know what, I think this thing is going to happen, X or whatever it is going to happen. We need to go and find, 10 or 11 people trying to build this thing and then go out and find it and then evaluate it and then make the investment? Or are you waiting for people to come to you?
Oh, no, we have clear thesis. For example, the investment we did in Nourish, which is in the creator economy space, right? So they help, your creators get more value for these videos they post, and they have the Indian chef Sanjeev Kapoor on their portal,
Yep,
right? So we are clear that space is going to expand and explode,
it is.
right? And so that intentional investment on our side, right? Similarly, the other startups that we are looking at, for example, Samaro, it is an event management platform,
Okay.
a virtual or a physical event, right? And it can help you improve the overall experience of the event, right? Let's say you have 1,000 attendees, etc. Right now, that's again a space we are seeing will change. Obviously, the pandemic has made changes to it already. It'll keep adapting,
Yep.
and we believe the metaverse will come into picture as we go along, right? So again, these are things that we are clear. Why are we into it? We have areas or segments that we want to focus and get startups in that space.
Yeah. It's just interesting you brought the event thing, both virtual, because everything I believe is going to be hybrid, right? We're going to be able to use technology to take advantage of building immersive experiences, but at some point, people are going to want to be together in the same room as well. And mixing those two things together, I think, is going to be really powerful. Let me give you an example. Let's say your grandmother, I always use grandma because I loved my grandmother. But anyway, let's say your grandmother is getting older, has never been to Paris, but you've been, and you've been to the top of the Empire, not the Empire State, but you've been to the top of the Eiffel Tower, and you just think, I want my grandmother to feel that feeling of going up the elevator, getting onto the observatory deck and watching it, but she can't go. So
Yeah.
again, this gets back to efficiency. Can't get on a plane, but could go into a room or could maybe, because I don't think headsets are going to be the way people interact with virtual reality, because I don't think it feels natural and you can't share it with somebody. Like you can't hold somebody's hand and have that same experience. But I do believe that there are going to be spaces where immersive technology can give those types of experiences. Is that what you're talking about when you say the metaverse in conjunction with the physical world is going to come together in a way like that?
I agree. And I think sports, for me, watching a football match with my friends
Yeah.
across the globe
Yeah.
is like an amazing experience. And I think that's where I think we will be heading towards sooner or later. And Samaro might solve some of those problems as it grows.
Yeah. So I have this idea, right? And it's just starting with a room. Let's say you sit in a room in India, and one of your buddies sits in a room in Paris, and the other one's in London or whatever, right? And yet we build an immersive experience that makes you feel like you're at, some stadium where you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
hear the
you
crowd
watch.
roar, you can hear the feeling, you get the feeling, you know what I mean? You get that sense that you're there, even though you're
Correct.
not in the same place, but we can use it doing immersive technology to give you that feeling. But on the other hand, you can also do it with shopping,
Sure.
right? Because I think about this in the context of e-commerce. Again, you want to go to some store in Paris, but you can't get there, but you can simulate it and make it feel like you're there, the salesperson's there, and the products are there, so that now you really want to buy because it's so immersive, right? This is the type
Yes.
of stuff I'm thinking
Yes.
about. Sorry, go ahead.
I agree. And I think, again, I relate more to the sports than the shopping. And
Fair enough.
I totally agree that if one can do that and keep doing that much better, watch Messi lift the World Cup, for example, that'll be awesome.
Okay.
Live sitting in India. But yes, the shopping, I think it has been tried a lot, shopping in the past few years. And it has not taken off the way I believe it is. And that might be because of two reasons. One, people are so used to, trying it out still.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
second, might be the technology was not
Not there
there. I
yet.
think we are at the cusp right now, and it might come soon.
So can I ask you this too? Do you look at investments that like the world is making and read the press and just think it's definitely too early? Like I know there's a bunch of hype around this, but it's definitely too early. And you sit around with your partners and you're just going, we're not doing that yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, we keep doing that, and I think there are some things we have decided internally not to touch or not to look into
Yeah.
because either it's too early or might be there are better technologies that will come and overtake it,
Fair enough. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something that you have to do a lot of research. So all of us spend a lot of time reading up on stuff, trying to understand what's the next thing that's happening, and keep ourselves updated on that.
Got it. Tell me something about the Indian startup ecosystem that I don't already know.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I'm seeing is people are trying to get into newer segments, which was not the case,
Like what?
right? So health, for example, bio life sciences is something that's taking up much more
Yeah. Yeah.
than earlier, right? And the government support is phenomenal there. Right. Okay. So the single one thing that if I have to say is driving it is the government support across central and state governments.
Okay. Yeah.
There's a lot of money available for those who want to, you know, get early grants, early fund, and there's a lot of encouragement. You can take a break in your education and come back a year later because you tried to do a startup. And that's a big change for where India was.
Do you feel like the government support that's there really is providing energy to the whole ecosystem? And I'll give an example and try to get your opinion on this. UPI is something, right? The payment rails, so important. The way money moves around any economy is just so important for the growth of that economy and the stability of that economy, but also for the inclusion, right? The financial inclusion for everybody. India has done this super duper well. Can you get a sense for that when you go out to people that are building stuff that they really appreciate the support that the government gives, not just in the example that you've given, but in other subtle ways where like they say, yeah, we need to have this for everybody, and
Well,
that's going to
yeah.
make the
So I
system
think
better. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, I think the government has also opened up, for example, for a startup to work with a government organization
Yeah.
was not so easy earlier,
Okay.
but today they have opened that up. So
That's great.
the space organization is working with the startup, right?
Right. Right.
ISRO is working with the startup. That's a new thing for India,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
That has happened over the past few years, right? The encouragement of startups getting involved with the government is much needed thing, and that has happened. Opening up of the financial stack, as you know,
Yeah.
and building on top of it has been phenomenal. I think it's changed the way the entire world looks at finance from India perspective,
I think
right?
so too.
And I think we have grown leaps and bounds with that stack. And there are other stacks coming into the picture, which will make a lot of startups grow because of that.
And what is that, like open
Right.
health information and stuff like that? Go ahead.
Correct. Open health information, for example, is a classic example.
Yep.
I think changes will happen in the insurance space a lot more, right? And that, for example, Silver Needle is waiting on that to happen and see where we can bet our odds.
You want to tell me how you think? So you know that I have one of the largest insurtech podcasts in the world. So I'm curious what you think about the insurance space in India as you look at it and think about how it's going to grow.
I don't know the exact numbers, but let's say the bottom 30% has low or no access to
Yeah.
insurance,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And how do you make that happen, right?
Yeah.
And that's coming is what I understand.
Yeah.
Right. And that will change the game entirely, right? Because today most insurance companies most of the insurance happens through offices in India. Right. It's not personal and much more involved space to get into the personal. The other space is the home healthcare.
Okay.
Can I get insurance for home healthcare, right?
Yeah.
I think that's another interesting space that can open up a lot of avenues.
Yeah, because penetration in the insurance space is so low, and because technology is changing, and even through the UPI, you see companies like PhonePay. We can go on and talk about insurance. The distribution side is trying to get solved. The knowledge side, right? So the literacy side is trying to get solved, and also the penetration side is trying to get solved. I love this idea, and India is a massive opportunity for growth there. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to take up any more of your time. I feel like I've done enough of that today. You got to come back. I want to keep an ongoing conversation, if you don't mind, as things change. I'd love to learn more about
Michael.
How this is going. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks for having me here. It was fun, and I look forward.
Ajay Jain, a co-founder and managing partner at Silver Needle Ventures. Thank you very much for doing that.
Thanks, Michael. You take care.